Okay, good afternoon. So today we are going to complete the module on the second module and also the topic on pharmaceuticals. And so we have quite a few of the complex preparations to be discussed today. In our previous webinars, we discussed about the simple preparations, and most of these simple preparations we could actually even make at home. But what we are going to discuss today are complex preparations which we cannot really make at home unless we have quite a good experience and some facilities and vessels. But it's important to know how these preparations are made so that we can distinguish them when we buy Ayurvedic medicines, and also we get to know how and where to use them. So let us start. Some of the complex preparations that we have not discussed are the fat extracts. These are fat extracts are again of two types. We have the medicated oils and the medicated ghees. And then we have the alcohol-based preparations, which are the medicated wines. And then we also have distillates, which are called as arkas. And then the lehyas, or medicated jams. Out of these, we are going to discuss only three: fat extracts, alcohol-based preparations, and lehyas or medicated jams. And in our webinar, we are only dealing with the most important simple and complex preparations. Because if you look at the entire variety of medicinal forms which are used in Ayurveda, they're quite complex and numerous. And we need more than a year of training in the Ayurveda courses to get to know completely about how these preparations are made. So in a webinar, we are having only about 6 hours for this topic, and so I think what we have chosen is more than enough to get a general idea. So when we say complex preparations, it means that we have to actually first do also the other simple preparations which we studied earlier, and just to refresh our memory, we will need to make decoctions, we may need to make herbal powders, we may need to make pastes. So these are basic methods of processing. And first, after processing in these methods, then we combine them and make complex preparations. So in our previous webinar, we studied about pills and tablets. And now we are going to study about fat, medicated oils and ghees. So I hope you all may be using medicated oils. Are you all using medicated oils? Sometimes, okay. Medicated ghee. Okay. So the main difference is that medicated oils are generally used for external application, whereas medicated ghees are taken inside. Both are used interchangeably, but this is just the general principle. And when we do this abhyanga or massage, Ayurveda recommends use of specific medicated oils. Depending on the ingredients, herbal ingredients with which we make the medicated oil, the results can be very different. So there are oils which can actually pacify pitta, oils that can pacify vata, oils that can pacify kapha, and also oils which are specific for different combination of the doshas. So Generally speaking, gingerly oil is what is commonly used. But we can also use coconut oil, and compared to gingerly oil, which is more vata alleviating, coconut oil is more pitta alleviating. Oils for kapha, actually mustard oil is specific for kapha, but it's not very commonly used in clinical practice. So we will now look into the details of how oils are prepared, and you can see that fat extracts means that the active principles are actually dissolved onto a fatty medium. So we can keep this in mind that at the very beginning I mentioned that there are three types of extractions in Ayurveda. We have the water extracts, then the fat extracts, and then the alcoholic preparations. So this is because if you take a herb or a plant, it is made up of thousands of chemicals. Some of these chemicals are dissolving in water, some are dissolving in fats, some dissolve better in alcohol, some are not heat stable, some are very heat stable, some are volatile and some are not volatile. So this is the situation with herbal ingredients. So in some preparations we have to apply heat, in some we shouldn't apply heat. Some we must use water, some we must use fat, and some we must use alcohol. So this is the principle that Ayurveda uses, and fat extracts, therefore, is a method whereby the principles which the components of herbs which are dissolvable in fatty media are actually extracted onto the fat media. So as I mentioned, there are basically two major yeah, it's correct. So to make a fatty extract, we need basically three components. So first are the liquids. So first we have to make the liquid part of the medicine, which are usually decoctions of fresh juices or other liquid ingredients like milk. So once we have all the liquids ready, then we add the paste. So herbs are ground into a fine paste, and then we add it to the liquids. And then we also use fat, which is either oil or ghee. So we need to take these ingredients in a particular proportion. So when you make a medicated oil, we use 1 part of paste, which means all herbal ingredients are ground well and made into a paste. And to this we add 4 parts of oil and then 16 parts of the liquid. So in a ratio of 1:4:16, we take the paste, we take oil, and we take the liquids. And then we mix them and stir them together. So is this clear? To make a fatty extract, we need 3 major ingredients: the liquids, the paste, and then the fat. And we have to use them in a particular proportion. 1 part of the paste, 4 parts of oil, and 16 parts of liquids. So now we will see that sesame oil, when you make medicated oil in Ayurveda, means most of the time, nearly 90% of the time, we are using sesame oil. And sometimes coconut oil and castor oil are also used. Other types of oils are very rarely used, like mustard oil. And sesame oil is specifically good for the nervous system. And in most of the vata disorders, we apply Abhyanga and we use sesame oil. So it's important to note that in Abhyanga or in massage, I hope you're aware of the term Abhyanga. oil application. And then we have massage, which is done after oil application. And so this is one of the major uses of medicated oils. So these medicated oils are mainly used for oil application externally, after which massage is done. They may also be sparingly used. They are also sparingly used for internal administration. But it's important to know that medicated oils are mainly used for external application. So maybe I think Maharshi and many other companies are selling a lot of oils in Europe and outside India. So oils are comparatively easier to export and import in Europe. And one of the reasons is because mostly they're used for external application and not for internal use. So I think medicated oils must be available. That's why I was asking that question. How many of you are using medicated oils in your practice? And I was surprised to know that you're using it only very sparingly, very rarely. So how do you do massage? So are you using plain oil? I see. So what are the pre-mixed oils? Okay, so that's a very different way of doing massage from how it is done in India. So maybe it's the difficulty in obtaining herbs and medicines that forces us to do this kind of practice there. So actually in Ayurveda we have very specific oils for specific conditions. So if a person is an asthmatic, we would recommend a different oil. If the person has having a neurological disease, we have a special oil. If the person has skin disease, then we have another oil. If the person has bowel disease, then there's another oil. So the oils are very, very specific, and we have a variety of oils that we use in actual clinical practice here. Okay, so that's about medicated oil, and then we have medicated ghee. So as I said, medicated ghee is basically, the preparation is very same. 1 part of the medicinal paste, 4 parts of the oil, of the fat, which could be either oil or ghee, and 16 parts of the liquids. This is the proportion in which the ingredients are added. Making your own oils is a bit challenging. You will know why it is a bit challenging, but I will be explaining the methodology today. So you can maybe try out some simple oils making yourself, but it's not easy. Because when you cook there is a stage of cooking. If you are not very careful, you can overcook the oil or you can undercook the oil. In fact, there are at least 5 basic stages of cooking fats and oils. And it's very, very important that we complete the cooking at the right stage. So if it is less cooked, it can create unwanted effects. And if it's overcooked, also it can create unwanted effects. So a very simple effect of incomplete cooking is if you apply that oil on your head, then definitely you will get sneezing and cold and such other problems. It tends to clog the channels. We have enough experience with this. So in those stages, we cannot really apply this kind of improperly cooked oil, which we say as ama. It increases the ama in the system. And if you use an oil that has been overcooked, then it can cause burning sensation or pain. The stage of cooking for internal use is different. Stage of cooking for external use is different. So even though the mixing and the proportions of adding the ingredients are pretty straightforward and easy in preparing medicinal fats, finishing the preparation is the most critical thing. Most of the time when we are inexperienced, it's either undercooked or a bit overcooked. And so then it produces unwanted effects. So as I was mentioning, it's the gingery oil or cow's ghee that are most commonly used to prepare the medicinal fats. It could be a medicinal oil or a medicated fat. Okay, so here is cow's ghee, which is very commonly used. Do you use cow's ghee? Okay, so in Ayurveda, the use of medicated ghee. So I will explain to you how we make these medicated ghees. So now let us look at the next slide. We will go into the methods of preparation. So to make either ghee or oil, the method of preparation is the same. It's only the application that changes. So ghee is used more in a pitta dominant condition, and sesame oil is used in a vata dominant condition. If you look at the method of preparation, the oil is first taken in a clean wide mouth stainless steel vessel. This is very important that the oil, when you're preparing it, it should be kept open in a wide mouth vessel. The mouth should be very wide, and also this vessel should be kept over a very mild fire, and then the oil is gently heated. So this is step one. I mean, those of you who would like to try making an oil at home, medicated oil, can please listen to this part very carefully. So first you take a wide mouthed vessel. In ancient Kerala and in India, we had every household had these special vessels to make the medicated oil. Nowadays, it's being industrially manufactured, but some physicians, like if you go to Kerala, you can see that they still have these equipments with which they make these oils. So the vessel is kept over mild fire, and as the fumes, you can see after a little while the oil gets heated up, and then you can see the steam coming out of the oil. When you start seeing this fumes coming out in the oil, that is when you have to add the liquids. So first is the oil kept in a wide mouthed vessel. Oil is gently heated, and as the oil is heated and the fumes begin to appear, you add the liquids and mix them well, and then you add the herbal paste. So then you mix this very well, and this mixture is then heated over low fire, and you keep stirring the mixture as you heat it. So the most critical thing here is that your heat should be very mild and controlled. You should make sure that the solid mixture that you're cooking shouldn't get overheated, and then very quickly it can get overcooked, and then the whole oil is spoiled. You know, if you apply a overcooked oil on your head, then your eyes will become red, and in your body you will feel like there's an excess heat. So these are all problems of an overcooked oil. So for that reason, we have to cook oil very mildly, and it takes sometimes 2 to 3 days or even a week to complete one batch preparation of the medicated oil. So this is the step then. So first we take a good vessel, pour the oil or ghee into it, plain, and after that is done, then as the oil gets heated, we add the liquids and the paste is finally added. So this is the sequence. This much is not challenging. I mean, you might begin to think, okay, this is something that I can do at home. Indeed, this part is not so challenging and it's easy to implement at home. But after mixing and after you start heating, that is where a lot of skill is required, because it's not as easy as we think. The finishing of the cooking is the most challenging. Most of the time people will make a mess of the finishing, because just as you are watching, if there's a slight increase in the heat, then suddenly the stage of cooking changes. Until the water content is fully absorbed, you can just simply blindly go on with the cooking. But at a point where the water content is evaporated, the moisture is gone, then suddenly the cooking will proceed very fast. So it is at this stage that your heat modulation has to be made very delicately. And you have to understand that if the cooking stage is missed, then you have to throw away the entire contents of that oil. So this is the slightly risky element when you want to treat make the this preparation at home. Then this is the risk that we stand. So the real skill in making medicated oils and ghees is to ensure that proper cooking has happened. And this proper cooking of the oil is determined by examining the consistency of the herbal paste. So now I want to ask you a question. Is this clear? Actually, this would have been very nice to be demonstrated through a video, because then you can see all the steps. The videos are a bit difficult to upload. So just to summarize, because now we are going to the most important part of the discussion on determining the quality of what we are producing. So here you take the vessel, pour the oil, and when the heating is optimized, we we express them as, you know, I'm sorry, just a moment. Yeah. So the proper cooking of the oil, you know, after you mix all this, there is this paste, the paste that is mixed in the oil. So it's with the help of this paste and its consistency that we will decide whether cooking is completed or not. So you mix all the ingredients together, and as the water begins to evaporate, the paste begins to change in its consistency. So it is by examining the consistency of the paste that we decide what stage of cooking has been reached and whether we can stop cooking. So, you know, the process is simple. We mix the ingredients and ensure that the water content is evaporated, but very slowly and very gently. And at the stage when the water content has been evaporated, we must start examining the paste. And depending on the consistency of the paste, we can decide whether cooking has been completed or not. So if you look at the stages of cooking the medicated oil, there are 5 stages. So these are the improperly cooked stage, the soft consistency stage, the moderate consistency stage, the hard consistency stage, and the overcooked stage. Out of these, we can medicinally use only 3 stages. Stage 1 and 5 are errors in our cooking methods. So this is the problem, and we usually make this oil at home. You know, we tend to either improperly cook it, it's taken before the cooking is complete, or it gets overcooked. So the real challenge is to maintain that consistency, and even the consistency in which we can use, they are only the soft, moderate, and hard consistency. The medicine should be either of these consistencies. And the soft consistency is used for a different purpose. The oil cooked in moderate consistency is used for another purpose. And the oil cooked in a hard consistency is used for yet another purpose. So is this clear? Because this is the crucial part, that as the oil is cooked, we put a spoon into that mixture and take out that paste, a little paste, and then check the consistency of the paste. So I will now describe what it means to test, you know, these stages and what will be the consistency. Let's look now at the improperly cooked stage. So the improperly cooked stage is happening if we take the oil without it being completely cooked. Now you take the paste and burn it, it will produce a crackling sound. Now because there is moisture. So if you have a doubt whether your oil has been cooked properly or not, just put a spoon into the mixture, take out the paste that is there. As the cooking progresses, you know, the paste and the oil and the liquid and the oil will begin to separate. So you can see the paste will come to the center and the oil will begin to separate. All the other liquids will gradually evaporate. So you can just poke and take a scoop of the paste that is there in the middle. And as you examine it, you will be able to know in what stage the disease has presented. I'm sorry, in what stage the oil is being cooked. So in this stage, the paste is very heavy. It will be mud-like, like if you start rubbing the paste in your fingers, then it will be very sticky. It's very heavy. And this is the improperly cooked stage. In this stage, if we use the oil, if we apply it on the head, then you will get sneezing and you will get all kinds of discomforts. Kapha will increase. And so this is not to be used medicinally. Now, the next stage of consistency is the soft stage of consistency. So in this stage, the paste will be soft, and we can also roll it into a wick. In fact, it will be a little bit wax-like. So if you look at that paste that is still boiling and the oil is separating. So what we have to do is just take a little bit of that oil or the waxy paste that is inside and put it into fire. So in the soft consistency stage onwards, there will be no crackling of the fire. There will be no crackling sound. This means that the moisture has been completely removed. And you can actually take that paste and roll it using your palms, and it will create a thread or wick-like material. And this is the soft consistency stage, in which the paste becomes soft and we can roll it into a wick, and there is no crackling sound because of the moisture. So this is the soft consistency stage. Is this clear so far? Any questions? Okay, so then we go on to the next stage, which is the moderate consistency stage. So in this stage, the paste gets cooked even further and it becomes a little bit more harder. And at this stage, if you take it and roll it in your fingers, you can see that the fingerprints will get impressed on this paste. And again, in this stage, moisture is fully removed. In fact, in the moderate consistency stage, you can see that the paste has now become very much like wax. It will be like candle wax, but a little bit more softer. It's a candle wax which is just melted, and there you can roll it, and that is the moderate consistency stage. And if you have, we will understand later in which stage of cooking we have to take the oil for which purpose. Now this is a practical thing. In many times when you buy oils, you may not know in which stage it has been cooked. So if you use it for the wrong purpose, like for example, if the oil which has been cooked for external application, then you should never use it for internal purposes. So a doctor may not specify this sometimes. He may just give a medicine, an oil for internal use. When you go to the shop, they may give you an oil which has been prepared for external application. And then when you internally consume it, it can produce some discomfort. So that's the reason we are now studying these different stages and understanding where and how they should be used. So this is the moderate consistency stage. And then we have the hard consistency, because as you keep cooking again and again, the consistency becomes hard. In this stage, when we roll the paste, it becomes very stony. I mean, it becomes quite hard. And when we try to roll it into a wick, it may break because of the brittleness. You're not any longer able to roll it and make it into a thread under your fingers. So in this stage, we can say that it has attained hard consistency. In fact, this is the stage in which we make oil for external application, applying on the body and the head. So it will be good if the companies which are making the oils use some kind of marking to indicate what stage of cooking it has been prepared and whether this oil is suitable for internal or external consumption application. and also what other stages of the disease they can actually be used. So up to the hard consistency stage, if you still further continue with the cooking, then you're going to get into trouble, because we come to the overcooked stage of consistency. The overcooked stage of consistency, the paste becomes sand-like and is very rough to touch. So these are subjective parameters on the basis of which we decide whether the cooking of the medicated oil or the medicated ghee has reached the optimal stage. So here in this overcooked stage, the paste will be having a blackish color. It cannot be rolled into wick now because it's all powdered and separated. And if you rub between the fingers, it crumbles into powder. I mean, it becomes very powdery like. And this oil, if we apply it on our head, then we're definitely going to get reddishness, heat in the eyes. Eyes will become red. You might lose sleep. So for this reason, we do not recommend making the ghees and oils at home, because without a little experience, you may undercook or overcook the paste. So it is better that you buy, and buy with knowledge about how this is being made. And good companies, especially those which are maybe practicing. So these are the 5 stages of cooking, and when we take the oil, we'll understand the significance of these different stages of cooking. The first and 5th stages of cooking are contraindicated for clinical use. And the soft consistency stage is used for nasal medication and or for internal consumption. So if you want to administer a medicated oil internally, or in other words, you want somebody to drink medicated oil, then you have to give it in the 3rd stage, or the soft consistency stage. Similarly, if you want to instill this oil into the nostrils, because there are some oils which we specifically apply into the nostril of the patient for cleansing the cranial cavity. So if we are doing that, then also we have to cook the oil in the soft consistency. So we should not give the wrong oil for the wrong purpose. So all of the oils that are available may not specify these subtle differences. They might just say it's oil and you can use it in any stage, but that's not true. You shouldn't be using it. So if you want to do enema, then you have to use oil also in the soft consistency stage. The moderate consistency stage can be used for all purposes. This is generally, so many companies will prepare in a moderate consistency so that it can be used both internally and externally, especially when oils are manufactured in large quantities. And this seems to be the only way out, that you can use it in the moderate consistency, and so for all the purposes it can be used. The hard consistency stage can be used only for external application. So in your experience, those of you who are buying the medicated oils, are you able to know in what stage of cooking the oil was prepared? Okay, so that's a very important thing. So you can try this out, and you can also always check whether the oil has any water content. So as I said, if you just put a little bit of the oil into fire, and if you see any, crackling sound, that means there is moisture. So you can use our such simple tests to distinguish whether the oil has been cooked in the proper way. And also by looking at the symptoms that people complain when they consume these oils, you will get a fair idea about which stage, up to which stage they have been cooked. So for example, if they get cold, running nose, and they feel generally very cool, blocked, congested feeling after applying an oil, then it's very likely because it has been undercooked. So sometimes even pharmacies in one batch of their medications, medicated oils may have this problem. So it's always good to know these symptoms, because then when you see the response from the patient, you will be able to judge where is the problem. And most of the time, even when the correct herbs are used, problems happen with oil because of the improper methods of cooking. So these are 5 stages, different stages of cooking, and in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage, we are able to use the oil for medicinal purposes, and the 1st and 5th stages of cooking are not to be used for any clinical purpose. So is this clear? So do you think you can make oil at home? It's simple. Simple but difficult yet, because simple, okay, you can try it out. Simple because you can just take the oil, then boil it, heat it a little, then add the solutions. So it would be 16 times that of the paste, and oil would be 4 times that of the paste. So if you have 25 grams of paste, then you have to add 100 ml of oil and 400 ml of the liquids, and then you boil it. So you might eventually harvest about 90 ml of oil. So the 10 ml would be lost in the process of drying and filtering and other things. So you can maybe at home also try to make a very simple medicated oil, maybe 100 or 200 ml of the oil. Then add if it's 100 ml, you need to just add 400 ml of water or 600 ml. And then you have to add another 100 or 200 ml of oil, and another 400 or 800 ml of the liquids. And then you keep heating it, and as you heat it, you reach a stage where the moisture is getting removed. And as the moisture is getting removed, the paste will become harder, and then you can check it and use the oil. So now, what is the shelf life of oil and ghee? It's a very important question. So generally, the shelf life of oil and ghee are considered to be only for 4 months. But in actual practice, they are used even for longer periods, even up to 1 year. So this means that if you are able to preserve them and keep them in a cool and dry place in watertight conditions, then you can prolong its use. It shouldn't be exposed to very bright sunlight. And with the storage, up to 1 year, you can use them safely. So there are some indicators, some signs which show that the oil may have gone bad. And that's a smell. So you know what is called as a rancid smell. Have you heard of rancid smell? Yes. So when the oil gets a little bad, you will get that smell. So that is a sign that the oil is getting damaged. And second thing is that the medicated oils have very strong smell of the herbs that are used. So when the prepared oil begins to lose the smell of the herbs that have been added, that is again an indicator that its expiry date is over. So if these symptoms or signs are seen, then the oil should not be used even if it is less than 1 year. And then if it is ghee, because ghee is mostly used for internal purposes, you can also know it by the taste. I mean, the taste of the ghee will become suddenly different, and then you should never use it anymore. So this is the way we judge the shelf life of oil and ghee, and then we use them within about a year. Another method which I have not described here to know whether the cooking is complete or not is the appearance and disappearance of bubbles while you cook. So when you cook, if you are making medicated oil, then there will be the appearance of bubbles or foam. So in the case of medicated oils, so here a question will arise. Those of you who want to actually try it at home, you mix all the ingredients and start heating. So you need to know at which point the water content is evaporating. Is it not? We cannot know this by time. Like if we are really doing some studies, we can, with controlling the heat and the quantity of the oil, we can predict after how much minutes the water content will begin to evaporate. But this is not easy. So there have been some clues that are suggested. When the water content begins to evaporate, bubbles or foam appears in the medicated oil. So when you begin to see these bubbles, then you can start testing. That is the point. You must take a little oil or the paste and put it into heat and try to burn it. And then if the crackling sound is also not there, then it means that the oil is beginning to end cooking. But in the case of medicated ghee, like if you are making a medicated ghee instead of oil, as you cook, there will be a stage when no more bubbles are appearing. The ghee becomes extremely clear, very clear and transparent in the stage of cooking. So in the case of ghee and oil, it's just the opposite. In the case of oil, appearance of bubbles indicates completion, and in the case of ghee, disappearance of bubbles indicate completion. So this is the way we know when to start testing it for completion. Is this clear? And this is of course important only for those who want to try making this. For those of you who are adventurous, I would advise that you try it once, because if you try it, then you get it is not necessary that you always make this, but at least once to try and make all these preparations is a good experience and gives you a deeper insight on how these medicines are made, and why we have to be careful about the way it is cooked. So even when you're buying oils from outside, you will have a better understanding to judge their quality and quickly decide whether they are safe for use and otherwise. So it's always good to try and make them in small quantities at home. Now we are coming to the dosage of medicated oils and ghee. The key principle for deciding the dosage is actually the digestive capacity of the person. So that is why you can see that the dosage has a very wide range. For an adult, we may even start with just 5 grams, depending on his digestion, and then we can increase the dose up to even 48 grams. So oil and ghee, this is the difference, that oil is usually administered less quantity. It's administered mostly for external use. Even when it is taken internally, it is given in a smaller quantity. Ghee is generally administered in larger quantity, and it is given for internal use. So this is the variation from 5 grams to about 48 grams. And so for people who are not used to taking ghee, a sudden administration of large quantities of ghee can cause difficulties in digestion and discomforts. So it's always better to start with a safe dose of 5 grams and then gradually increase it. On an average, we will not need to go beyond 15 grams of ghee per day. The 48 grams of ghee per day and all that are in very specific conditions, very specific diagnostic situations of diseases, but otherwise 5 to 10 grams, 10 to 15 grams is the best dosage with which we should administer. So I hear that none of you are using medicated ghee. Anybody is administering or using it? Medicated ghee or even plain ghee? I guess no. Have you heard of Brahmi Krita? It is a medicated ghee which is very commonly used. Another important example, Dhanvantaram Thailam. Have you heard of this oil? So these are one very commonly used, very commonly used ghee and medicated oil. So there are many such other important oils like Maha, Narayana, Thailam. So when now you hear of these names, you know what goes on behind making them. Mahanarayana Thailam is also a very famous oil used in Ayurveda. Have you heard of these oils? Any other ghee which you might have heard of? Okay, yes. So this is the one aspect of making these Triphala ghee, yes, exactly. That's very good for the eyes. It's very cooling. Yes, so then now we have some more things to discuss regarding medicated ghee and oil, some variations in the preparations and some examples. And when we complete this, irrespective of whether we take 90 minutes, we will have a break and then continue with the other 2 preparations. So when I finish this medicated ghee and oil, we break for a little while. So some more slides are there. Now, it's a very interesting preparation. Now, this is something which if you want, you can make at home, but you need a lot of patience to do this. This is also an illustration in Ayurveda of how simple methods of processing can completely change changes the properties of substances. Simple methods of processing can bring big changes in the properties of the substances. So we have a method of preparation called water washed ghee. So ghee wash in water for 100 times or 1,000 times. So how do we do this? So what is done is that ghee is taken in a vessel which should be very neutral, and then you mix it with water so that it's level with the ghee. I'm sorry, there is a mistake in the slide. The mixture is rubbed with the palm of the hand until the water becomes warm, not cold. Please make a note. Until the water becomes warm. In the slide, it is wrongly mentioned as until the water becomes cold. Is this clear? Did you note the difference? It's very, very important. Because by rubbing, the water will never become cold. It actually becomes warm. So you the ghee and the water and keep rubbing with your palm, and after a while you can find that the water becomes warm. Then you throw away that water and then you pour fresh water and again rub it with the palm of your hand, and then you throw away that water and then again you pour water. This is repeated for 100 or 1,000 times. It's again a spelling mistake. It's not related. It's actually repeated. Please make a note of it. This process is repeated for 100 or 1,000 times. And this resultant ghee is extremely cool in potency. It's used to relieve burning sensation. It's used to relieve pitta. So it's a very, very simple method of preparation. So if we have the patience to keep rubbing the ghee 100 times by mixing with water, then you have this preparation. It doesn't require any sophisticated machines, industry level facilities. All it requires is a plate and some ghee and some water, and then the willpower to repeat the process for 100 or 1,000 times. So this is called 100 times washed ghee. So in Sanskrit, this is called as Shata Dhauta Ghrita. Shata means 100, Dhauta means washed, Ghee, Ghrita means ghee. So 100 times washed ghee. And as I said, this is used in burning sensation. We apply this in neuropathy. Have you heard of neuropathy? So it's a problem in diseases like diabetes. The nerves are damaged and there is severe burning sensation. So an application of this ghee, which is washed 100 times, can be very cool. You can also apply the ghee on top of your eyelids and it can cool down the eyes. You can also apply this anywhere where there is severe burning sensation or burns and it's unbearable. Then this ghee is very effective. I have used this very much in many diseases. There is also another not in the active stage, and you should not apply it inside the eye. after the acute stage is over, you can apply it outside. It should be only applied on the eyelids. It should not be applied inside. So for inside we have other herbal preparations. So yes, but even after the conjunctivitis acute stage is over, if the patient feels some burning sensation and needs some cooling, then you can apply it. Always apply it on the outside on the eyelids and make sure that it doesn't go into the eyes. So here is another interesting preparation called Pancagavya Ghe. Has anybody heard of this medicine? Has anybody heard? Okay, so its translation is Pancagavya, means using 5 ingredients from the cow. That's how it derives its name. 5 ingredients from the cow. And these 5 are milk, curds, dung, urine, and ghee. So mixing all these things, the ghee is cooked. So you may wonder why we are using urine and dung. So they have their medicinal properties. And this particular ghee has been considered to be very helpful and useful in the management of mental illnesses, especially epilepsy. But people have to take this for a long period of time to get visible results. So the only limitation is that a long period of intake is needed to get the optimal results. So these are I just showed 2 examples of commonly used ghees, medicated ghees. So those of you who are having access to Maharshi, Ayurveda or such vendors, you will definitely be able to get the Pancagavya Ghe there. Next is another method of preparation of oils, which is a variation of the method of oil preparation that we discussed so far. Here, as I was mentioning, when we are administering oil internally, we should not administer it in very high doses. It has to be administered in very small doses. So, in other words, if you want to administer oil internally, Ayurveda doesn't recommend drinking too much of oil. So we have to potentiate the medicine, make it concentrated so that we can administer it in lesser quantity. So to increase the potency and lower the dosage, the oils are repeatedly cooked again and again. So you first make an oil by mixing the paste, the liquids and the oil, and then all the liquid component, water content is evaporated, and you test the consistency of the paste, and it should be either soft, moderate or hard in consistency. And once this is done, you take that oil and then again add the liquid and the paste and again cook it. Then we take the oil, filter it out, and again add liquids and paste and cook it. So every time this process is repeated, some oil is lost because of wastage. And this repeatedly cooked oil, we need to administer only as drops. Very little is enough. Very little of these oils, can be administered for internal purposes. Has any one of you used these concentrated oils in your practice? Have you heard of such oils? Have you heard of Chirabala oil? Okay, so Chirabala we have also 101 repeats. So that oil is called a Chirabala 101. So which means that when you use the number 101 against the name of an oil, it indicates that it has been cooked for 101 times. Similarly, there is another oil called Dhanvantaram oil. This also we have 101, which is the maximum number of times it is cooked. And the texts say that if you want, you can also cook it 1,000 times. The medicine will be all the more potent, but then a lot of wastage of oil happens, a lot of material is gone. So in actual clinical practice, we do not prepare medicines by repeated cooking of more than 100 times. This will take several months to prepare, and this is something which the industry is doing on large scale with the help of machinery and other gadgets and paraphernalia. It becomes possible to, repeatedly cook the oil and filter and make these repeated oils. So the number of repetitions, if you ask, there are some reasons which are being explored now. The typical numberings are minimum is 7 times. Some people also cook it for 10 times. So if some of you really have an itch to try this kind of a repetition at home, then I would advise you must restrict with 7 repetitions, because beyond that is really very time consuming and also wastes a lot of resources if you do not have an industry setup where you can really squeeze and take all the last drop of oil from your preparation. Then you would be incurring heavy losses. So 7 times repeated, then it's 14 times. In between, some people recommend 10 times also. And then you have 7, 14, 21 times, and then 41 times. And then also 101 times. So this is the way the oils are cooked repeatedly, and then we get this concentrated material, which is much more potent and powerful. So these can be administered in drops, as I mentioned. 6 drops, sometimes 2 drops twice a day, or 6 drops. Has any one of you administered oil in drops? Such oils, like for example Chirabala. Okay, yeah, that's a different type of oil, Untitled. But I'm glad that you know Untitled. Untitled is also a very powerful oil. In fact, we all use it every day. We apply it into our nostrils every day to open up all the channels, and it's good for clearing the channels in your head region. It's also good to prevent sinus, and Anu actually means minute channels. And so Anutailam means that which clears all the minute channels of the body. Okay, so I'm glad to know that you're using it. It's also a very potent medicine oil, which is prepared using special methods. But a discussion on these special methods of making oil is beyond the scope of our discussion today. So now we are coming to the end of the first part of a webinar. We have 3 more slides to be presented, which we will deal with in our second part today. So I'm just giving to end this section of the oils and fats. The Dhanvandaram Thailam 101 is an example, and then Chirabala Thailam 101 is also another example. So is this clear so far? Any questions? We will discuss alcoholic preparations, and we will also discuss medicated jam in the second part. Second part will be therefore a little longer because I didn't want to start a new topic in the middle of the break, so it would be good to start a new topic after the break. So we'll take about 10 to 12 minutes a break and then come back and continue our discussion. Please remember that with today we are completing the second module. So the key lessons that we have learned is that oils and ghee, the most critical part in their preparation is in the checking the stage of cooking. If they are not stopped, the cooking is not stopped at the right stage, they tend to get undercooked or overcooked, both of which can produce clinically unwanted results. And specific types of the stage of cooking is important for different types of application of these oils. And we also learned that there is a method of concentrating the oils to increase its potency so that it can be used in lower doses, and that is done by repeating up to 101 times, and then your dose can be drastically reduced to even a few drops. So these are the basic principles and understanding of how to make oils and fats. And so let us stop here, and we will continue and come back in maybe 10 to 12 minutes. Hello, can you hear? Okay, so we continue. So now we are going to look at the other types of preparations, and the 2 more that we're going to discuss today. And one is the fermented preparations. These are called as the medicated wines. I don't know if any one of you has used this yet in your practice. Have you used this in your practice? Okay. Yes, I do not know if there are regulations outside India in using these medicines, but these contain. self-generated alcohol, but this alcohol content is not strong enough to cause any, psychological disturbances. So the medicines in this method are prepared by a process of fermentation. So such medicines are also called as spirituous liquids. And here we are not adding alcohol, but actually there is self-generated alcohol. Alcohol is generated in the process of fermentation itself. So these preparations are sometimes, for convenience, called as medicated wines. But these translations are not perfect because we cannot say that these are actually wines. There's some resemblance, as you will see when we discuss the method of preparation. So is anybody aware of any example of a medicated wine in Ayurveda? Can any one of you remember or recall, or do you have heard of any such preparation? There's something we normally jokingly say is an Ayurvedic wine, which is also made out of grapes. It is a fermented preparation. It's good for anemia and it pacifies pitta. And this is known as drakshasa. So it's a very common medicated wine which is very similar. This we can say is almost like wine because grapes is the main ingredient, and to this grapes we add other herbs, and so drakshasa is almost like a medicated wine. So now we'll look into the details how medicated wine made. So since I did not get any response, I understand that you have not used any medicated wines and you are not having access to medicated wines. So medicated wines are okay. Yes, there is Amrita. Yes, it's used for fevers. Great. So, yeah, that's nice to know because these feedbacks from you helps me to understand at what level, of exposure you have. So that's very helpful. So yes, Amrita is made out of the herb called guduchi, which is Tinospora cordifolia. It's an immunomodulator. So in this method, the liquid drugs are mixed with other medicinal drugs and powders, and they are kept closed in an inert vessel for a bit of time and without moving, and when it is kept there for a long time, the fermentation happens and then there's alcohol generation, and the resultant material that we get is called as the medicated wine. So the key thing is that alcohol is never added, rather, alcohol is generated in the process of preparation. So fermentation, this is a very technical, scientific, definition of what is fermentation. It's considered to be an incomplete oxidation of sugar into ethanol and carbon dioxide in conditions without oxygen, and this process is facilitated by specific enzymes like invertase and cymase, which are secreted by yeast cells. So in the presence of yeast, there is an incomplete oxidation of sugar into ethanol, and this is how the alcohol is generated when we are making medicated wine. So from this we can understand that sugar and certain enzymes for fermentation are important ingredients of medicated wines. So now we will try to understand how these medicated wines are made. But before that, we will understand why this is used in Ayurveda and what are its advantages. So, some of the key advantages of medicated wines are that it consists of self-generated alcohol, which also serves as a preservative. So these medicated wines have infinite shelf life, and we say that the more you keep it, the more better it becomes. So there is infinite shelf life. This is a key feature of medicated wine. Other preparations have limited shelf life. And these medicated wines should not be used immediately after preparation. They should not be used. So usually we have to keep them for some time. And we say if you can keep it for 1 year, then it becomes really mature and good for use. It's very similar to how the wines are brewed. So they are medicines. When you make through these medicated wines, they are better absorbed into the body, which means they have more bioavailability. They actually stimulate appetite, and the addition of sweetening agents, make it more tasty and easy to use. And they also act like tonics. So these are very special preparations which are widely used for emergency care. I think this I mentioned earlier. One is the medicines work faster. Because they are absorbed faster. So these are the advantages of using medicated wines. Now we will try to understand how these medicated wines are actually prepared. So if you look at the ingredients, there are the drugs for decoction. So you have the liquid preparations, the sweetening agents, then you have the additional drugs, and then the fermentation initiators. So if you want to make a medicated wine, you need these 5 ingredients. So drugs for decoction means the herbs from which you are going to either prepare a decoction. So please recollect the methods of making a decoction. You take the herbs, you dry them, you cut them into pieces, and then you pour a specific quantity of water, then boil it and reduce it to a very specific quantity, filter it, and this is how decoctions are made. And then we have the liquid preparations, which could be the fresh juice, or it could be, usually fresh juice. It can be buttermilk. Sometimes we use buttermilk also as a liquid. So along with the decoctions, according to the formula, we add these other substances. And then we have sweetening agents, and these sweetening agents are very crucial for generation of the alcohol. So the sweetening agents are sometimes jaggery. In our previous webinar, we talked about jaggery, and some of you couldn't understand what it is, and in spite of my showing a picture. So I was suggesting that you should probably check this out, what is actually the meaning of jaggery, and maybe get a better understanding of what it is. So it's very similar to brown sugar. but it's not crystalline. It's prepared and taken in a condition or a stage before actually the crystallization of sugar. So this is a very key ingredient in making medicated wines. And then we have certain additives. These are powders which are later added to the mixture with which we will make the medicated wine. And then we have the fermentation initiators. So if you have these 5 ingredients ready and prepared, then we can plan to make a medicated wine. So is this clear? Okay, thank you. So now we will go into the details of making these alcoholic medicines. So you must have seen these old wine barrels made of wooden cylindrical wine barrels. So this is quite famous all over Europe, and wines were brewed inside these wooden barrels. In India also very similar pots were used, but most of them were actually made out of mud rather than wood. Most of the things, mud is used, baked mud, clay, and so they are made into big barrels, and these pots are then fumigated before use. They are kept in a dark and cool place, mostly inside underground cellars, where the temperature is kept stable, and there is not much air. And then these vessels are kept in husk. Do you know what is husk? It is the outer covering of rice grains. When the rice grains are dehusked, we collect the husk. So this husk is heaped. We make heaps of this husk and then put the barrels in such a way that they are completely immersed in the husk. So the use of the husk is actually to preserve the temperature. So it is a kind of insulation, and it ensures that the temperature inside this wine pot will be preserved and remain stable till the brewing is complete. So what we do is take this pot, fumigate it, then put it, in a heap of husk, and then you pour the liquid portion. You take the liquid portion and pour it inside this wooden pot, is this wine pot. So it is poured inside, and after pouring it, you can take the sugar, the jaggery or the sugar candy, and then mix it well with this liquid portion. And then, actually, after mixing it well, it's advised to take out that liquid and then filter it and then pour it back again. So this is the first step in preparing these alcoholic medicines. So after this filtered liquid is filled into this mud or wooden pot, then the additional ingredients are added, which are actually the powders, and then it is mixed well, and then finally we have to put the fermentation initiators. So I will explain a little later what these fermentation initiators are, and they will actually stimulate the fermentation and the generation of alcohol. So once we put all this and mix it, then the pot is kept undisturbed. Now this shouldn't be removed for quite some time, because otherwise the fermentation will not happen completely. So we have to see for the first 2 or 3 days, you can just keep the pot closed and you have to wait and see where the fermentation has started. And once you are sure that the fermentation process has started, then the pot should be sealed and covered with cloth and the lid, so that you know it's really water, air. This is really very, very important. So when you are sure that the fermentation has started, you really seal it well. So then you keep it for about 30 days and the pot is checked for signs of complete fermentation. There are methods to actually test the start and end of fermentation, that I will explain a little later. So once we have ensured that the fermentation is completed, and as I said, the average time for this completion is about 30 days, and then the resultant liquid is siphoned out. You siphon it out and take it for external use. So this is kept in another vessel, and this is again left for another 2 weeks or so for continued fermentation, and after the fermentation has been completed, it is stored in airtight bottles and then again stored for some months before they are actually used. So according to Ayurveda, we should not use alcoholic preparation immediately. It has to stay and mature. And if it has been incompletely or improperly fermented, then there will be a strong sour taste. So one of the biggest challenges, this is also a preparation which you cannot really try to make at home. Although this is a very, very useful preparation. In actual clinical practice, we cannot do with medicated wines in India. Quick results. Suppose a patient comes, he has a fever, you want the fever to reduce immediately. Then we use Amrita Arishtam, as you were mentioning, the Arishtam which is used for viruses, viral fevers. So if you do not have an Arishtam, you cannot bring down a symptom very quickly. There is a Arishtam or a medicated wine called Kutacha Arishtam. This is a very good emergency medicine for dysentery. So if you give this medicine, dysentery will stop immediately, and you cannot get this result with other forms of medicine. So this is really, really very, very useful. And in my practice, I have also used some medicated wines to bring down blood pressure. Like, there are two, the Shamula Arishtam plus Abhaya Arishtam. You can check whether these Arishtams are available in your country. By mixing these two medicines, certain types of hypertension can be controlled. And within half an hour to 1 hour, the blood pressure drops down by some units. So this is the importance of alcoholic preparation. But it's not easy to make it at home. And the most common problem that we face is that it becomes sour. And then you cannot use it for medicinal purposes. It can cause acidity, it can aggravate pitta, and create all other kinds of imbalances. So is so far clear, alcoholic preparation? So far is it clear? Any doubts or questions about the procedure? Okay. So then we move on. So there are some tests which we can do to know whether the fermentation has been completed or not. One is actually the burning candle test. So when the fermentation is going on, if you burn a candle and you take it near the uh, place where medicated wine is kept, it generates a lot of carbon dioxide during the process of fermentation. So if you take the candle, a burning candle, near this wooden barrel in which the wine is fermenting, then that flame will be extinguished. And when the fermentation is complete, the candle burns without being put off. So by using this burning candle test, you can understand whether fermentation has been completed or not. And this is also very crucial for the quality of the medicated wine. So while in Europe, people were specializing in making wines and all kinds of wines, people in India were specializing in making asavas and aristas. So this was for an entirely different purpose. So we have developed and fine-tuned these methods to control the quality of these medicated wines. Much like in Europe and other cold countries, people spent a lot of time and developed very, very sophisticated methods to make wine. So these tests are also very crucial for understanding whether fermentation has started or whether it has stopped. And in a similar way, there are some other interesting tests also to know whether fermentation is happening. So is this clear what I discussed right now, that during fermentation carbon dioxide is produced. So there's a little bit of science here. And when the carbon dioxide is produced, the flame, a candle flame that you bring near the wine barrel, it will just get extinguished. So this is because of the effect of the carbon dioxide. On the other hand, when the fermentation is completed, then there is no more excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and so even if you take the candle near the wine barrel, there's nothing happens. So this is it. Then we have what is called as lime water test. So we take a pipe which is connected to the barrel. So you take a long pipe and then insert it into the barrel on one side and keep it sealed. And after some days, when you are sure, when you're beginning to know that the fermentation has started, then you can take the other end of the tube and put it inside a bottle of lime water. So so this lime water will actually turn milky white because of carbon dioxide. Again, so because during the process of fermentation, carbon dioxide is released. So there are two ways in which we can test this. One is the candle burn test, and the other is the lime water test. So in one, the candle flame dies off, and the other, the lime water will become milky white. Aware of these methods of testing? Okay. Anyway, I don't think any of you would be wanting to try to make these medicated wines. I would strongly recommend not to. Uh, but it would be good to try and find some way to at least get access to some of the important medicated wines so that you will be able to manage patients, especially conditions where some quick effect of the medicines is needed. You will be able to do that in a more effective manner. So, is there any law that prohibits the use of alcoholic substances? Because you know, these medicines have alcohol less than in wine. So I don't think there should be any problem in using it because it's even milder than wine. And the dosage in which it is consumed is also less than the quantity of wine consumed. So legally, I understand that there should not really be any problem. So we should check and see if these medicines can be made available. So next thing is the fermentation initiators. So maybe most of you would have thought that we must add yeast because yeast promotes fermentation. So you may have guessed and maybe thought that we have to add yeast, but yeast is not usually used in ancient times. That's not the classical method of making these medicated wines. There were some herbs and plants that were actually used. And I will show you some of these plants. And yeast was the last option. And also, since if you are continuously making these medicated wines, then you can actually use the residue of a previous preparation to initiate the fermentation process. So these are all the possibilities. So, but the most commonly used fermentation initiators are flowers of two plants. And these two flowers of these plants themselves have very good medicinal properties. One of these plants is Woodfordia fruticosa. Now the botanical name may not be familiar, but I think I must tell a few things about these plants because the important and Woodfordia fruticosa is called as Dhataki. Has anybody heard of these names, either the botanical name or the Sanskrit? Okay, so we will see the picture of the plant now. In fact, I can show it right away. So this is the plant. It's sometimes called as the red bell bush. So some of the interesting properties of this plant is that it is very good in fever. Have you heard of the red bell bush? No. Have anybody seen this plant? Maybe not. I have no idea whether it grows in the places where you're coming from. So you can see here, this is the form in which it is used for medicinal preparations. It's dried, and after it has been collected from the herb, from the plant. And here you can see this is how it is live on the plant. It's very red, beautiful flowers. And these flowers themselves we can use for a variety of conditions. So it's very good in controlling fevers. It's an astringent drug, astringent substance, which means it is able to stop diarrhea. And it's also very good in female menstrual disorders. It can produce excess discharge from the female genitalia. It controls the excess. And it's also helpful for external application. It can be used to apply on skin to relieve from burning sensation. It can also arrest bleeding to some extent. So what I wanted to tell is that in Ayurveda, when we make use of herbs, they have multiple purposes and multiple benefits. So you can see they have chosen, this is sometimes fascinating to understand, that they choose a plant for fermentation, which has not only the ability to create the fermentation and generate the alcohol, but it also has other medicinal properties. So at the industry level today, this is very crucial. When you see a good addition or a medicated wine, please look at the ingredients. So from yesterday, I'm mentioning about some of the important practical tips that we need to distinguish between a pill and a tablet. A pill shouldn't be swallowed, a tablet can be swallowed, like that. And today we discussed about oils and the stage of cooking. And sometimes when you buy an oil, you are not aware at what stage it was cooked, and so you may use it in the wrong way. And if it's overcooked or undercooked, it can cause burning sensation and things like that. So similarly, when you look at a medicated wine, the key thing that we must look at is the ingredients. So what are the fermentation initiators? Have they used these plants, or have they used yeast? So now you know, if you use yeast, you will never get any of these, properties which you can see in Woodfordia fruticosa. So Woodfordia fruticosa is also a check. It ensures that the alcohol, it nullifies the bad effects of alcohol. So this is a very beautiful formulation technique that they use. So when we use these flowers of this plant, they generate alcohol, but because this plant has anti-pitta activity, it can also prevent the alcohol from damaging the body. So that is the reason why in Ayurveda we use these flowers to generate the alcohol and not yeast. So in some places where these flowers are not available, they may have made the wine by adding yeast, and then you can say this wine in which is made out of, or this medicated wine which is made out of yeast, it is of inferior quality. So is this point clear? So I discussed some medicinal properties also of this herb. Okay, so then we go on to the other plant. The other plant is Mathuca longifolia. This is also used for fermentation. Yes, so this is important. This is important. That is why we say we should not use these formulations which is made out of yeast. And that's a very interesting observation because, you know, Dhataki is also good in IBS, or Woodfordia is a treatment for IBS. It's used in the treatment for IBS. So you can just see how balanced the preparation is because of the choice of this herb. So once when I was discussing with an analytical scientist in Netherlands about the way Ayurvedic fermented preparations are made, and then he was surprised, and you know, he was saying that it's amazing how these ancient people discovered the multiple uses of a plant and brought them together in such a balanced way that one counteracts the unwanted effects of the other. So now we will look at Mathuca longifolia. This is also another plant which can be used for, you know, fermentation, and it's an alternative for yeast, and it also has very similar properties. The first choice is Dhataki, but the second choice, this is sometimes called in India as Mahua. That's the second plant, Mahua. I don't know whether you know this plant. Has anybody got familiarity with this plant? In English, it's sometimes called as the honey tree or butter tree. So you can see the botanical name, and this plant also has its own medicinal properties, which is what makes it interesting. So apart from generating the alcohol, it can also be helpful in giving some additional medicinal properties. So this is sweet, it's sugary, and it also pacifies pitta, and people make sometimes a drink out of these flowers to cool their system. And people also make jam out of these flowers, and this is good for soothing and cooling the system. On the other hand, compared to Dhataki, you know, they have slightly opposite properties. The earlier flower is astringent, it stops diarrhea, whereas Mathuca can slightly promote laxation. So this is probably the reason they used two of these herbs. Where you want to have a balanced action, you can choose either Dhataki, Pushpa or Mathuca. So to conclude that part of how to use the fermentation initiators in Ayurveda, we made sure that the herb also has a balancing effect on the whole medicated wine. So you have within the wine itself an ingredient which will prevent a lot of its harmful effects on the body. Then of course comes the yeast, which is more of a modern practice. When you add yeast, you get a different kind of alcohol which is not balanced by those herbs, and so this can lead to some unwanted effects on the body. So is this clear? Is this much clear? Okay, so we continue. And the next one. So there are two types of these medicated wines. They're broadly classified into two. And I want to introduce a couple of Sanskrit terms. These terms are important because when you buy a medicated wine from an Ayurvedic shop, they will end with two suffixes. They will be either called as an asava or they will be called as an arishta. Both asavas and arishtas are medicated wines. But then what is the difference? Have you heard of these terms, asava and arishta, by any chance? Yes. So you can see some are called as asava and some are called as arishta. And at the first level, even when you taste it, you cannot really make a difference because they may look, appear, smell, and taste very, very similar. So here I want to explain what's the difference between an asava and an arishta. So in the asava, actually the liquid part is made without cooking in heat, which means the liquid that is used in an asava has not undergone any heating, which certainly rules out the use of decoctions. So this is a completely non-heat based procedure. And when you do it that way, then the resultant medicated wine is called as an asava. And now you would have guessed what is an arishta. So an arishta is that in which the liquid part is made through a process of application of heat. In other words, when we are making an arishtam, we are using a decoction. When we are making an asava, we are not making a decoction. So I just want to let you know there are some other ways of preparing liquids apart from fresh juice. So when you make an asava, you might also be using what is called as a cold infusion, where powder of herbs is immersed in cold water and it is kept overnight and then filtered and used. So when you are making an asava, you use any of these things, and when you make an arishta, you actually heat it. So this is the difference between an asava and an arishta. And you might ask, what is the effect on the physiological system? So that's also important to discuss. So in arishta, the liquid part is made by cooking. So arishtams, if normally these medicated wines are slightly aggravating pitta. So that is the reason why they are using herbs like the woodfordia flowers and the mathuka flowers, because they all have a ability to moderate the effect on pitta. So another way in which this effect on pitta is reduced is by not using liquids that are not cooked. So from this we can understand that an asava is slightly more gentler on pitta compared to arishta, which if you have a pitta condition in which you have to give an arishtam or a medicated wine, then asava would be a better choice. So we have also a very famous, very commonly used asava in Ayurveda, which is called as chandana asava. So I hope you know what is chandana. Chandana is sandal, and sandal is extremely cooling. So an alcoholic preparation made out of sandal is called chandana sava, and this is for many reasons. So we use Dhataki flowers, so it is not against Pitta. And then, we use Chandana, which is directly acting on Pitta. And then we do not cook the decoction. So in this way, heat is avoided. And therefore, through all these reasons, this medicine becomes very much specifying for Pitta. So this is the difference between Arishta and Asava. So now we come to dosage. How much of this should be used? And so its maximum dosage is about an ounce, maybe 25 to 30 ml, and this is taken twice daily. And a very important thing in administering asavas and aristas is that they should be administered only after food. They shouldn't be administered on empty stomach. And when you administer them, you also add pills to these asavas and aristas. And then its effect is much more strong and fast. So if you are giving, now some other practical tips are there. If you want to administer these medicines in people, one of the biggest problems with asavas and aristas are that they may cause hyperacidity. So when you administer to patients, you can be a little careful. So one of the ways to prevent this from happening is to dilute the medicine by adding some water. So you can dilute it by adding equal quantity of water. And when you administer it in a diluted form, then it will not cause that much acidity. Similarly, if you want to administer this to children, then again you have to not only reduce the dose. So in children, the recommended dose is 5 ml to 10 ml at the most. Very young children, babies up to 3 years of age. The first year, we shouldn't be giving any aristams at all. And after 2 years, you can maximum give 5 ml. And you can also give it in divided doses. And you add equal quantity of boiled and cooled water. That's also very important. We should never administer aristams with hot water. So we should never. But we can use boiled water, but after the boiled water has completely cooled down, only then we should use. And so this is the principle, 10 to 30 ml twice a day after food. And if you find that it is provoking some acidity and other discomforts, then you can dilute it with water and give. You have also the option of giving it in divided doses. And then to create a more pronounced and strong effect, we can also dissolve some pills into the asavas and aristas and administer them. So with this, we have covered also another dosage form, which is medicated wine. So, and now we will continue with the last dosage form for today, which is the medicated jam. And so before that, I would like to know if you have any questions regarding the medicated wine and its application. Okay, so everything is clear. That's great. So we are going to now come to the last part. And this is the discussion on the medicated jams. So medicated jams are called as lehyas or avaleha. Have you heard this? Okay. Do you know any name of any avaleha that you have used? It helps to know what level you have some exposure. Can you give any example of any avaleha that you have used? Most of the medicines, if it's a leha, it will end with the name leha. But sometimes they end with the name rasayana. So, can you remember some name of any medicated jam that you have used or prescribed? Yes. Excellent. So you are aware of what is a layhem. And so what is the peculiarity of the layhems? Do you have any idea why these are prepared in this way, and what is the special way of its administration? Because if you know some of the basic things, then it makes my task much easier. Now, actually, the layhems are, the meaning of the word lay here means to lick, which means that you have to actually not swallow it, but you have to lick it. You take it in a spoon. So this is a very important thing. If you want to get the proper results of a lehya, if you don't administer it in the right way, then you will not get the benefits. It has to mix with saliva. That's the most important thing. So it's because we want it to mix with saliva that we are making it into a lehya. And you should therefore never swallow it. Some people, by mistake, they roll it into balls and then swallow it. Oh, that is disastrous. So this is not the jam that we spread on bread. This is medicine. So the principle of that medicinal aspect of the pharmacology is the mixing of the substance with saliva, because you know there are some digestive enzymes in the saliva that it must come into contact with, and then only changes will happen. So just keep this in mind, that we have to actually lick it and mix it with saliva before it is swallowed. And the next thing is that after we consume it, usually we advise that a warm milk should also be taken. So yes, lehyas can be nourishing, but the key thing is lehyas are also helping to remove excess kapha. So it brings a kind of, it removes the sliminess in the mucous membranes. And controls the excess secretions. And usually lehyas are all rasayanas because of that. Rasayanas means that which enable the smooth circulation and transformation of the body tissues. So most of the rasayanas are administered in the form of lehyams. And you also know, you already mentioned, Chavana Prasha is a rasayana, and it's also a lehya. So I'm really surprised to know that you put it to toast. How? What do? You mean you spread it on bread? Oh my God. So this should never be used that way. I mean, the best time for taking the lehyams are at bedtime. The last thing you do before you go to bed is that you can take these rasayanas and then follow it with a half a cup of warm milk, and then that's it. Then you go to sleep. So here is the definition. So we now go into the slides one by one. And medicated jam is a preparation of medicine that is licked and dissolved in the mouth. And this preparation ensures that the medicine mixes with the saliva. So yeah, so these are the two principles, licking it and dissolving it in the saliva. Okay. So then that's very important. So that's very interesting. So you have to be very, very careful with the way we use these medicines. And so I think mentioning these, going through this topic is really very crucial on the practical level. And Chyavanprash is actually such a specialized medicine. And if you use it in the proper way, it's given in treatment of cancer in a particular stage. It doesn't help in all stages. It's given in the management of rheumatoid arthritis, and all these autoimmune diseases in which you need to stimulate and rekindle and reorganize your immune system. So now we look at the definition. How is this medicated jam made? Now, unlike medicated oils and medicated wines, if you have a little interest to try out, you could actually make medicated jams at home. It's not that difficult. But you need some skill to bring that consistency. And this is a big challenge even today for the industry. It's not easy to make a lehyam in that exact consistency. It has to be soft and yet a little hard, little rough, so that it cleanses as you swallow it. It shouldn't be too hard, and it should be palatable, because otherwise, since you have to mix it with the saliva, this medicine will remain in the mouth for a long time. And so if it has very bad taste, then people can get nausea and even vomit. So that consistency is really very crucial. And this is actually made, it's a semi-solid preparation, like a jam in consistency. And it is made by a process of solidification of liquid preparations. You take the liquids and then you solidify it by adding sweetening agents and then cooking it. Then you add powders, and then when it reaches a jam-like consistency, you take it out and use it. So this is the definition of a medicated jam. And now let's look at what are the ingredients needed. So again, here you need a liquid portion, which can be a fresh juice or a decoction. And then you need jaggery or sugar. By the way, do you know what is the main ingredient in Chyavanprash? No. So honey is in all layers. So the main ingredient in Chyawanprash is amalaki. Have you heard of amalaki? Yes, so that's the key ingredient. And I don't know whether you're aware, many of the formulations manufactured today do not contain amalaki. They use other fruits and then you will not get any benefits. And today some studies have been conducted which have shown that, if you use amalaki as a rasayana, then it prevents DNA damage. It may not be able to reverse, but it can prevent DNA damage. So it's very, very important. So again, if you are going to buy Chyawanprash, please make sure that you get it from a good company where they have really added amalaki. And that Chyawanprash is the best in which they have used fresh amalaki fruits. So this is very crucial. Okay. So you have a liquid portion which is a fresh juice or decoction. Then you have a sweetening agent which is the jaggery and the sugar. And then the medicines which are the powdered herbal drugs. And then you add ghee and honey. And all these things you mix together and then you cook them in a particular way and then you get the medicated jam. So here are some proportions. So you take 1 part of the herbal powders, 4 parts of sugar candy. So do you know sugar candy? These are actually chunks of crystalline sugar. Is it possible to get this? Yes. So there will be like rocks, crystal rocks. So you use these refined sugar, it's not advised. So these chunks of crystalline sugar and then 2 parts of jaggery. Jaggery was something which I already mentioned in my previous webinar. Also given the picture of that. And I think with that you can try to search out and find out actually what it means for you. And then you use 4 parts of liquid. So this is the proportion of the ingredients with which we will make the medicated jam. Now the process of preparation. So the decoction of the fresh juice is first prepared in the required quantity, and then the sweetening agents are dissolved in the liquids, and this mixture is filtered through a clean cloth. So this is very similar in decoction, in medicated wines, and in many of the other preparations you can see a very similar procedure being followed. That you first take the liquids and then mix it with the sweet agents. And then when they have been really mixed well together, you filter it through a clean cloth. And the filtrate is boiled and then the water is evaporated. And as the water evaporates, it becomes solid. And then at the consistency of medicated jam, it is taken and used. So we'll learn a little bit more about these procedures, how it is actually made. So the most interesting part here again is the final stage of preparation. That unless the consistency of the preparation is maintained and we cook and take it out at the right moment, it will not have a proper medicinal use. So when the filtrate is boiled to a consistency of 2 to 3 threads, You know, this is a consistency is when it is getting cooked and you dip your finger and take your finger out, then you will find that this paste, it comes out with your hand and it forms a thread. I hope you're able to get what I'm saying. If you dip your finger and pull it out, then this mixture will also come along with your finger, and you can find that it forms a thread like. Is this clear? Did you get what I wanted to convey? Yeah, yes. So that's what we call as a, so when the filtrate is boiled and it begins to make those threads when you dip your finger, that is the stage when you start adding ghee to the preparation. So then you add the ghee and then you know, cook it well. So thank you for the patience. Actually, it was about uh, a patient from the hospital, so I had to, you know, attend it. So I'm really sorry for that interruption. Yes, so we have just a few more slides to complete today. So the final stages of preparation is very crucial. So when it becomes thread-like, it is taken out, then the additive drugs are added, and when the preparation is cooled completely, that is when honey is to be added. So ghee is to be added when it takes the consistency of a thread, and after the cooking is completed, we add the herbal powders, and when it is cooled, honey is added. So this is the sequence in which the medicines are, you know, added and it is completed. Now there are some tests to be sure that you have cooked this medicine in the right way. So there are about 5 parameters that we have to check. One is thready consistency. That if you take that the finished medicated jam, which has been completely cooked, you have to take it out and put it into a glass of water or a vessel of water. And when you put it into this vessel of water, it will fall down in the shape of a thread. This is really very important. So this is called as thready consistency, and it will sink in water without dissolving. So if it is not cooked properly, and when we put it into the water, what will happen is it will just mix with water. But when it has been properly cooked, it will just go to the bottom without dissolving in the water. And it will go by forming a thread-like shape. And then it will be having a certain roughness and stability. And another aspect is that once this preparation is completed, and if you press your finger on the medicated jam, this is very similar to the consistency that we checked in the preparation of medicated oil and ghee, the paste that when it is cooked and when it becomes of soft, moderate or hard consistency. In the soft and moderate, when you press your finger, the fingerprints can be seen on the paste. In a similar way, here also, when the leha or the medicated jam has been properly cooked, then you know you see the imprint of the fingerprints. And then you have the color, order, and taste of those specific herbs. Like if it's Chavanaprasha, very easily after making Chavanaprasha, every time you taste it, you can know whether it has come in the right consistency. The smell, color, and taste is also tested. So after testing, going through these 5 tests, you can be sure that you have prepared it in the right way. And when it is prepared in the right way, definitely it will produce the necessary clinical effects. So this is also a preparation which you can try making some of the simple formulations at home. Chavanaprasha will be a bit challenging because you need gooseberries or amalaki is needed to make it. And you need nearly 40 to 50 other ingredients which may be very difficult to source. So I don't think you can think of making Chyawanprash, but there are some other simple formulations which you can try out. Now we come to the next question: what is the shelf life of the medicated jam? As you have seen here, as we go from the simple to complex preparations, the shelf life improves with the complex preparations. And the maximum shelf life is for the medicated wines. And the minimum shelf life is for the water extracts like decoction. So if you make a decoction or if you make a fresh juice, then you have to use it the same day. You cannot keep them for not more than 12 hours. Sorry, not 21, 12 hours. And the shelf life of the medicated jam is 1 year, and it should be stored in a cool and dry place. And some of the biggest challenges for the medicated jam is that it can be affected by fungus. If there is a little moisture content, then medicated jams are affected by fungus. So even when you are taking the medicine with a spoon or when you are opening it to consume it, you have to really make sure that there's no water content that goes inside. The spoon that you are taking should also be free from moisture, and then you can use it for about a year. And these legumes which are more than a year old are not really recommended for internal use. And it's fairly easy to know if the legumes have gone out of, if they have expired or if they are not good for use. There will be definite change in the smell, taste, and color. And you can see that because these medicines contain jaggery and sugar, when they are exposed to the atmosphere, it can attract moisture and then it liquefies a bit. So these are some of the important practical things that you must keep in mind when you are using legumes. Now legumes are very good for removing, clearing, as I said, clearing the mucus secretions. So there are many legumes which are used very effective for cough, for clearing the throat. So a very important legume called Agastya Rasayanam is used in Ayurveda as a rejuvenative and also for clearing phlegm from the lungs and the respiratory tract. So is this clear? Any questions? Okay, so now we come to the dosage. And the dosage is about 5 to 15 grams once a day. And it's usually taken at night, followed by half a cup of warm milk. It's always good to consume a rasayana with some milk, because rasayanas are by themselves, preparing the body to accept and digest nutrition. So they are not by themselves directly nourishing, but they prepare the body to accept nourishment. This is very crucial. And so when you take, and the best nourishment for the body is milk, because it's through milk that our body is formed. So it's like you are being made a baby again when you take a legume. So just like your body is made receptive, just like that of a baby, that is what the rasayana does. So that is the reason why we advise that you should take a little milk when you take a rasayana. because the milk becomes the nourishment which the rasayana can use and then strengthen your body. And so you don't need too much of milk, but half a cup of, and usually warm milk is recommended to be taken just after taking the legumes. And the legumes should always be, most of the time it should be consumed at night, at bedtime, just before you go to bed. Sometimes, in some conditions, when there is so much of kapha in the system, then, it is also given on empty stomach in the morning. In conditions where kapha is dominant. So the dosage is variable. You can start with 5 grams, and for children it's just 5 grams. In adults, the average dose is about 10 to 15 grams. And some medicines, some legumes are also administered at a dose of up to 25 grams. So this is variable. So some of the rasayanas or legumes are also used as purgatives and laxative. So we have a legum which is called as Trivrit legum. This is a preparation which is actually used for laxation. And this legum we sometimes give up to 25 grams, but at that dose it really causes very strong purgation. So it should be used with caution. And this is something I'm only telling as an example. I wouldn't advise anybody without very extensive medical training to use these kind of medications. So these are some of the examples of the lehyas. Chavanaprasha, which one of you already mentioned, and then Agastya Rasayana, and then Kushmandavaleha. So with this we are coming to an end of our module on pharmaceuticals, and there's some important lessons. I'll take a few minutes to conclude what are the major things that we need to learn through this webinar. Is that the lesson on pharmaceuticals is trying to clear up some misconceptions. And the main misconception is that herbs are to be powdered and used, and to be used singly. This is not Ayurveda. Powders are harmful, they are not balanced, and they have the whole herb without any balancing. So in Ayurveda, powders are rarely used. And in Ayurveda, we use different types of preparations: water extract, fat extract, and alcoholic extract, which is in tune with the modern principles of pharmacology. Because in our body fluids, Kushmandavaleha is used for strengthening the lungs. So it is used, you know what is the main ingredient in this is ash gourd. Ash gourd is a vegetable, but there's a medicinal variety of ash gourd. Have you heard of ash gourd? Yes, so the normal ash gourd is very big, and that's not medicinal, it's a vegetable. There is a smaller variety of ash gourd which is medicinal, and this has a power effect of cleansing the lungs. So this medicine is not helpful when you have acute bronchial asthma, it doesn't help. But between attacks, and when you have a remission, when you don't have an active asthma attack, after doing some cleansing, if you take Kushmandavaleha, then it can strengthen the lungs. On the other hand, Agastya Rasayana can be used to remove phlegm from the system. This can be used in an acute attack. So this is the usual sequence. In acute phases, we give Agastya Rasayana, and when there is no acute condition, to prevent recurrence and for strengthening, use Kushmandavalaya. So that's a good question, and I think I made that very clear. So now we have the water extracts, the fat extracts, which are oils and ghees, and then you have the alcoholic extracts, and then we have the legumes. And you must have realized what are the critical points here, the gutikas, the pills, where you should swallow, which you shouldn't swallow, which one should be mixed with saliva, what is the time in which it should be used, which can be used for what type of physiological, pathological condition. And you can see that Ayurvedic pharmaceuticals is quite complex. The complexity is not to confuse, but to get better results. And we couldn't cover all the topics, but I hope I was able to cover some of the important, preparations and discuss them from a practical point of view. And I hope this information will help us to make use of Ayurvedic medicines in a more intelligent manner. And also it lays the foundation for you to explore in greater detail, get more information about more complex forms of Ayurvedic preparations and their administration. So with this, we are concluding, I think, the second module. And in the next webinar, we will be going on to the final third module of this webinar series. And there we will discuss with treatments, actual treatments, and there would also be some case studies which I will present, actual experiences of treating patients. So thank you very much, and so have a good day.